Okay, welcome, History 6C. We are dealing with the French Revolution. Um, just did with the American Revolution. Let's get some basics out of the way first of all, okay? The French Revolution. French Revolution, obviously in France, 1789. Starts in 1789. We're talking about 13 years after the American Revolution. There's a lot of debate, guys, about what the American Revolution was. The word revolution means change. Were the Americans fighting for change, or were they fighting to keep what they had? Well, there's a debate about that, right? And it's important because it tells about the roots of the nation. This is a conservative nation fighting to maintain the status quo. Some people argue that's what the revolution was about in America. Some people say it was about changing society. When it comes to the French Revolution, there is no question about this. This is about change, dramatic change, quick change, type of change that affects all parts of society. We start this off in 1789. The King of France is Louis XVI. Louis XVI has inherited a country that is bankrupt. It's had poor harvests for the last 10 years. There is an absolutely imbalance of wealth. The few having the vast majority of the wealth, while the vast majority of the population having less or very little. By the way, before we go any further here, guys, get your notes, right? French Revolution. Remember, these talks are about a survey, and it's not about in-depth stuff. You use this with your notes and the reading, right? 1789. So, in 1789, Louis XVI. Louis XVI is known as a vacillator, someone who finds it impossible to make up his mind. And you'll see this, hopefully, in this quick survey about a guy who simply was not prepared to rule, and when the pressure was put on, didn't really know what to do. Maybe it wouldn't have mattered in the end. History was moving and was moving without him. Louis XVI in 1789 finds himself bankrupt. He's an absolute monarch, which means he can do and say what he wants. But on the other hand, you can only tax people for so much, and he doesn't have many resources left. The French had helped the Americans in the American Revolution. The result had been Britain had remained the new nation, the United States' primary trading partner. France had gained nothing from this. They had been involved in the French and Indian War, which they had lost. Canada, a huge resource. So by the time of 1789, France is a bit on the ropes here. Poor harvest means hunger. It means that the middle class, the small middle class, is afraid of their property. The lower classes are afraid of going hungry. In 1789, Louis makes a very dramatic, a very important decision. He decides to call together the General Estates. Now, the General Estates is France's representative assembly. And by representative assembly, guys, what I mean is they represent primarily property people. There are three estates. There's the church, that's the first estate. There's the nobility, that's the second estate. There is the masses, what they call the general public, which really was lower nobility, professions like doctors, lawyers, all these people represented. The three estates had not met since 1614. They did not like each other. They never talked to each other. They voted separately. And in 1789, when Louis called them, he was assuming what he would be doing is calling them together. They would meet in their separate places, and they would come up with some ways to come up with some money, come up with a way of dealing with these problems for him. The problem with Louis and what he didn't understand was by the time he called them in June of 1789, there was general unrest throughout the country, and he was unaware of this. Enlightenment ideas had spread. The ideas of liberty and freedom and equality had spread throughout Europe and had the effects, were starting to have effects, same kinds of effects they'd had over in North America. When the representatives began to show up in Paris, they brought with them their complaints, their arguments, their problems. And what they realized, especially members of the Third Estate, what they realized that throughout the country they all had the same problems. Now remember, guys, there's no CNN, there's no satellite television here, and people living in Marseille don't know what's going on in Normandy. They don't know the problems that they have, or the same problems exist wherever they go. But when they arrive in Paris in 1789 and they begin to talk and they begin to meet in cafes and they begin to discuss these issues, what they realize is they all have the same problems. As they begin to meet and get angry and angry, they begin to point their anger towards the nobility and the church, those that always maintained power throughout France. A man named Abbé Sieyès, Abbesieyes. Abbé Sieyès is in your notes, writes a pamphlet called What is the Third Estate? And what he argues is the Third Estate is France. The Third Estate represents the real people of France, the masses of France, and therefore the Third Estate should rule. The Third Estate should run things. Well, it's certainly a document that fits within the Enlightenment, but it's pretty radical for the times. But the fact is that most people in the Third Estate and throughout France, as they read this, in Paris, as they read this, agreed and said, well, that makes a lot of sense. Louis doesn't know what to do, but the Third Estate does. The Third Estate decides that on June 21st, they're going to have a meeting. They're going to have a meeting, they're going to rent their own hall, they're going to have a meeting, and they're going to decide what to do next. Louis hears about this, and so a couple of days before this meeting, Louis comes up with this idea. What he's going to do is send troops, lock up the building, make it impossible to go in, assuming the members of the Third Estate will arrive, be unable to get in, go home. Okay, it's not a great idea, but it's an idea. Sure enough, on the 21st, members of the Third Estate arrive. They try to get into the hall that they've rented. They can't get in. But instead of going home, the members of the Third Estate cross the street, and they go to what has traditionally been called a tennis court. It was really a handball court, but they call it a tennis court. And here it had bleachers, and they all sat there and they had a meeting. And they declared what is called the tennis court oath. The tennis court oath says, we, the Third Estate, will not disband until we have a constitution, a written constitution. They go back to Paris, and now their followers begin to riot. Supporters of royalty begin to oppose, and they begin to riot against the rioters. You have chaos in Paris. Now, guys, to make a generalization, throughout most of French history, most major problems start in Paris. And if they stay in Paris, that's pretty much as far as it goes. The nobility knows this. They see the Parisians get angry, and they begin to burn couches and blockade intersections in Paris. And that's something that they've kind of seen before. But if the riots, if the problems in Paris get into the countryside, usually in French history you begin to see some change. In late June, early July, the riots are in Paris. The anger is in Paris. On July 14th, the rioters attack what's called the Bastille, the prison of Paris, believing that there are political prisoners in there. They finally break through. The captain of the guards lets them in. They kill everybody, cut their heads, put them on pikes, which becomes a symbol of the French Revolution, parade them through the streets. And of course, there was nobody in the prison, no political prisoners, but this is the storming of the Bastille. This is France's Independence Day. We have the signing of the Declaration of Independence. They have Bastille Day. The riots after the storming of the Bastille now begin to spread throughout the countryside. And you begin to see the destruction of noblemen's families, noblemen's homes, noblemen's farms. Now, it's one thing to be part of the French aristocracy and sit there in Paris and see riots going on and say, oh, well, the Parisians are at it again. But when you begin to hear that your property and your family are being murdered or destroyed and your wealth is being destroyed, that's a whole different matter. By August 2nd, the French nobility have begun to realize that they need to change, and they're going to have to change something or they're going to lose the very wealth that they've been able to accumulate. The 2nd of August, the Second Estate and the Third Estate meet together. First Estate, being the church, decided to close its doors and really not participate. They'll pay for that later. At this meeting, the French nobility agreed to give up all their privileges. And what does that mean? Well, guys, part of the whole point of being part of the aristocracy is privileges. The idea that I can do things that other people can't do, and things can be done to other people that can't be done to me. These are privileges. Otherwise, you're just wealthy. By giving up your privileges, it means that there's nothing special about you. You're equal with everybody else. And they write something called the Declaration of the Rights of Man. The Declaration of the Rights of Man is truly a revolutionary document. It attempted to change everything in French society. The relationship between the aristocracy and the masses is now said to be equal. All people, adults, will have a right to vote. There will be a fraternity. There will be equality between employer and employee. They tried to change everything. And of course, they tried to change the government. While this is going on, much of the French aristocracy has decided to leave. Those who could see into the future and see that this is going to be a problem. Louis, on the other hand, doesn't really know what to do. Louis is a vacillator, as I said before. He's not sure what he wants to do. He's not sure how to get out. In September 1791, Louis decides to make a run for it. He's going to go to Austria. His wife is Austrian. He's going to get an army. He's going to come back, take back his country. And like all of his plans, this ends up in a miserable failure. Louis is caught, him and his family. They are brought back to Paris, and they're put under arrest. We have now what's called a constitutional monarchy. This is essentially a monarchy that has no real power, and the third estate is now running France. Louis is now trapped. He's in prison, and he can't go anywhere. The third estate now begins to rule France. The third estate is made up of over 500 members, I think 543 members. But it doesn't have any really organized parties. It has groups of people who agree with certain things, but not large political parties like we would think of today. The largest group are the Jacobins, who are Republicans. They believe in public participation in government. They want everybody to be active. They want full change in France. And the leader of the Jacobins is Maximilien Robespierre. Now, Maximilien, along with Louis, is the second major character in the French Revolution. Maximilien starts his rule as a true revolutionary, someone who believes in the ideals of the revolution, someone who wants to see true change. But during his rule, ruling the Jacobins, therefore ruling the Third Estate, therefore ruling France, he begins to become more and more unstable. It is said that under his reign of terror, as Maximilien's rule is called, over 40,000 Frenchmen and women will be murdered, sent to the guillotine. Just a quick interlude here, guys. Many years ago, I was in France during the bicentennial of the French Revolution. And the big debate then was, the big argument, everyone was talking about Maximilian, they were talking about Louis. And when it came to Maximilian, they had a really interesting kind of approach that I've always really kind of bought into, which was this. Maximilian started off as your number one revolutionary who truly believed in a republic and believed in perhaps peaceful methods of doing this. But all these people began to talk about, if you've ever been totally responsible for something that you truly love, that every decision you make will determine the failure or the success of that one thing. It creates a lot of stress. It creates a lot of pressure. Maximilian may, in fact, rather than being the serial murderer he's been often depicted or being insane, it may be that Maximilian simply was crushed under the pressure of trying to protect the one thing he loved most of all. Certainly by 1792, 1793, he's becoming paranoid. He's beginning to see enemies everywhere, and Maximilian is looking for enemies. He's looking for people to punish. He's afraid. We'll get back to Max in a moment here, guys, all right?